It's almost embarrassing how long it's been since I've actually made a YouTube video, and we'll get into the reasons for that in a little bit. But I was at an event last week held at the Four Seasons in downtown Toronto, hosted by Greybrook Capital Partners, which is a private equity firm that finances and funds a bunch of pre-construction projects throughout Canada as well as the US. Some insights from that I thought I would share with you because I think they would probably be beneficial, and because why not make a YouTube video? So my name is Vas. I'm a real estate broker right here in the city of Toronto, where I help investors and families navigate the insanity of our real estate market. All right, so first of all, who is Greybrook? Well, Greybrook, private equity, effectively they raise money from other investors, and they're capital allocators in the sense that they'll pick projects that they want to finance with different builders that usually have good reputations. They provide financing for the construction of the build, and then basically that's how the project gets launched. What's really interesting about them is they obviously have a bunch of smart people working for them. So when they're analyzing projects and where to invest, what projects to fund, there's a lot of thought that goes behind it. If you've ever heard of the Starbucks effect, this is kind of similar. So for example, some real estate investors will watch what Starbucks is doing and they will invest wherever Starbucks opens up a new coffee shop, because they'll usually put a lot of thought and analysis into the area they're going to be opening up a Starbucks because of demographics and what they feel is going to happen in the future. To me, Greybrook is kind of similar to that. They're like a larger version of Starbucks, but focused specifically on real estate and where they feel development is going to be happening. And this is important because I think it provides you the context as to why what they say is important. Now, as capital allocators, obviously they have a bullish case on Southern Ontario and areas they invest in, because obviously why would you invest in something that you don't believe in? One thing that they had mentioned is macroeconomic factors and why they believe Southwestern Ontario is probably one of the best places to invest in. So the argument, or one of the arguments, was actually immigration, and an argument we've all heard before many, many times. When it comes to immigration, most people typically will stay in the GTA or the Golden Horseshoe. So effectively, in the past, what would happen is immigrants would come here, myself included. When my parents arrived here in the late 90s, we stayed in Toronto. And then as immigrants would come, as it gets more expensive to be in Toronto, they would move out. So they would go into the GTA. And then it seems like now the Golden Horseshoe, basically anything outside of the GTA, it's still up for grabs. And people are willing to stay here, not move to Sudbury or the East Coast or Winnipeg or any of these other places. Although some people do, some brave souls are willing to do that. Most stay here. The reason for that is Toronto is the only economic center within Canada that provides the level of opportunity that we have here. There is no other place in Canada that has as much opportunity and community for anybody that's new to the country or looking to build a future for themselves. So with that said, that is Toronto's unique advantage when it comes to real estate. Now, what's really interesting, or an insight I found from Greybrook, is that just south of the border, so remember, in Canada, we have only one place like Toronto, but in the United States, you have multiple municipalities or metropolitans where they provide something similar like Toronto. You have a lot of economic opportunity, which is probably the number one driving factor for immigrants, that safety, assimilation, all these different things. But if you think about it, in the US, there are probably 20 other cities that are similar like that in economic development, where they have immigrant populations already, that are probably very enticing for other immigrants to go to because they have a lower cost of living. So if home ownership is important to you, which I think to just about anybody it is, I think if the US was to loosen up their immigration policies, that could be a big threat here for the Greater Toronto area. Now, obviously, this is long-term thinking. I don't think this is an immediate risk to our real estate market right now. In fact, I took some age distribution graphs for US and Canada. I did some very, very rough math. So feel free to challenge me on it, and I'm sure you're going to be right. But what I gathered is that Canada is roughly 9 to 10 years ahead of the US in terms of age distribution, meaning their population age distribution is better in the sense that they have more young people than we do relative to older people, which is important because you need more younger people to be working, to be productive, to be paying taxes, so that we can be paying for old age security and social security for our aging population. However, if the US at one point feels that they need more younger people, they're going to do this via importing them through immigration. And if they loosen up their borders, I think most immigrants are actually going to elect going to the US rather than coming to Canada, and that is our risk. Now, the one counterpoint I will say to that is, it seems to me in the US, they intentionally don't do a good job of manning their borders with Mexico. And I think the reason for that is simple. This is how they backfill the need for younger people that are working and doing jobs that people don't want to do. And eventually they become taxpayers and fulfill this gap of an aging population. They just import it through Mexico illegally. And that's kind of what the backstop is. So whether or not we're going to get some immigrants taken away from us because. So anyway, that is my insight for this week. I hope you found it insightful. And this is kind of like a warm-up video for me. I have a really good interview that I'm going to be releasing next week with former city planner. We're going to talk about everything that's happening in the city of Toronto right now as it comes to multiplexes and major transit station areas. I'm also going to tell you about what I'm planning on doing with real estate this year, or I think opportunities in the GTA in particular, because as you guys know, finding deals as investors right now, it's very difficult. And I think the opportunities are far and few in between, especially with the current interest rates. But that doesn't mean that there aren't opportunities. There's always opportunity as long as you're always looking.